This week, Meg Oliver has been reporting on how American children are coping since returning to school post-pandemic. And Meg joins us now. What I loved about all these stories, Meg, was that they brought real detail to a story we've been covering kind of in abstract numbers. And I want to start with the work you did in Louisville. We've talked about absenteeism. 14 million students are chronically absent. You went down to Louisville. What did you find about what was working or what the school district there was trying to do to reach these students?
What really stood out to me in Louisville is that they're still invested in finding these missing students. So many school districts across the country have stopped going door to door, knocking and looking for these students. There is an investment there. They have found that that direct contact pays off. Once they reach a parent, once they reach the student, they can start that process. They can start to remove all the barriers that might be preventing them from coming back to school.
And that's what struck me, is how much detailed hand-to-hand, kid-to-kid work has to be done. In Tennessee, that seemed also to be the story, which went all the way up to the governor of Tennessee. Let's take a look at your story from Tennessee, and then I'll ask you about it.
Small groups meet 3 days a week before, during, and after school for what's called high-dosage tutoring to combat pandemic learning loss.
Crocodile. Well, in my view, the kids were at stake.
Tennessee Republican Governor Bill Lee called a historic legislative session back in January of 2021 to address his state's failing test scores, while many students across the country were still attending school virtually.
It's kind of one of the redemptive stories of the pandemic for me, is we implemented things that we weren't doing before that will produce better outcomes than we had before the pandemic.
So Lee has a background with kids, and also tell me about what you saw in terms of the tutoring, the, again, hand-to-hand, close, child-to-child work that has to be done to make up these gaps.
This was one of the happiest schools I've been in a long time. These kids were coming an hour before school, and they couldn't wait to get to their tutor. Small groups, kids love attention, and they love to do well. And they're getting that affirmation that, you know, my grades are going up, I'm doing well. You can see there's a nice confidence. And when it comes to the governor, when he stepped in to address learning loss in January of 2021, there were so many school districts that were still shut down virtually, that nobody was even thinking about that. But he has a special history. He started tutoring an at-risk student years ago, and he would meet with him once a week for 5 years. He talked to his parents. He got them to move him to a charter school, and he saw how this child just responded to the attention. And it's something that he's also married to a teacher, you know, so there's a lot of education there. They're focused on it. They passed the funding for 3 years, but they expect to continue this tutoring even after all of this is set to expire next year.
If hands-on, close relationships with these kids are what works, one thing that gets in the way with that is screens, social media, these devices. Let's look at the piece you did on that.
At Newburgh Free Academy in New York, cell phones are locked away for the entire school day, including lunch.
How much do you blame the phones and social media for taking a toll on your mental health?
All of it.
All of it.
For me personally, yeah.
I blame my darkest moments because of my phone.
You can't learn when you're consumed with darkest moments.
No, you can't. And did you see that lunchroom? That they were looking at each other. They're not looking down. They're not aimlessly scrolling. You walk through the lunchroom and people are talking to each other. They're getting up. They're conversing. It's a completely different environment. I've talked to so many different experts who say, if you have that phone in your pocket, that's like having a heroin addict, you know, saying, oh, you can hold on to those drugs, but you can't shoot up. That's the same thing with these phones. The constant notifications are going off. They're distracting to the teachers. They're distracting for the kids, not to mention the online bullying and looking at the videos and everything. So once they took those phones and locked them up, their school completely changed. They got their students back.
In all this work you did, what gave you hope about what's still a pretty tough situation in terms of scores and schooling?
It is a tough situation, and in each place, they still have a lot of challenges, but we also found a solution in each place. In Louisville, we found that direct contact works. In Tennessee, we see this tutoring. We see little 10-year-old Rakaya Woods getting B's and now A's. And now we see this school where they're locking up their phones and kids are feeling better about themselves. And we sat down with the Surgeon General who said, we have to have breaks. We have to craft out breaks for these kids. It's too much social media. It's too much of the constant notifications.
True for adults, too. Meg
agree.
Oliver, thanks so much for your work.